The Sig Sauer P-226 was already pressed against Kim Jae-won's ribs when his phone rang. He stood in the private suite of the Grand Hyatt Hotel, adjusting his black tuxedo bow tie, the cold steel more comfortable than the silk choking his throat. Outside, 600 guests waited in the grand ballroom. Inside, his father's enforcers positioned themselves at every exit, ensuring today's wedding proceeded exactly as orchestrated. A merger, a treaty, the end of a brutal 5-year turf war between the Kim and Chae syndicates, sealed with Jae-won's marriage to Chae-lin, the Ice Queen of Seoul's shipping empire, the Treaty of the Han River worth $800 million. But in 90 seconds, everything would shatter. In 90 seconds, a phone call from Accra would obliterate his wedding, ignite a syndicate war, and send him fleeing halfway across the world to save the woman who vanished from his life, and the twin sons he never knew were fighting for their first breaths. Before we dive in, make sure you subscribe to my channel right now. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. And comment below right now. Where are you watching from? What country? What city? I want to see how far this story is reaching. Trust me, this story will take you on an emotional roller coaster you won't forget. The phone buzzed against the marble vanity. Unknown number. Accra, Ghana. Jae-won stared at it, his pulse suddenly hammering in a way firefights and executions never made it do. Nobody from Accra should be calling him. Nobody except her. And she wouldn't. She'd made that devastatingly clear when she disappeared a year ago without a word, without a trace, without giving him the chance to choose anything but the blood-soaked path his father had carved for him. Hyungnim, it's time. His second-in-command, Minho, appeared at the doorway, his expression unreadable. Your father is getting impatient. Chae-lin is waiting at the altar. Jae-won answered the phone. Is this Kim Jae-won? A woman's voice panicked, urgent, speaking English with a West African accent. Who wants to know? My name is Aisha Kofi. I'm calling from Korlebu Teaching Hospital in Accra. I'm with my sister, Amma. Amma Kofi. Her voice cracked. She's in critical labor. The babies are premature and breech, and there are complications. She's been asking for you for the past 6 hours, Mr. Kim. The room tilted. Babies? There are 2 of them, Mr. Kim. Aisha's voice broke completely. Twin sons. And if you don't get here soon, she might not survive to meet them. Jae-won walked through the doors of the grand ballroom like a man already dead. 600 faces turned toward him. Politicians, business magnates, syndicate heads from across Asia, all waiting to witness the union that would reshape Seoul's underworld. The string quartet fell silent. Chae-lin stood at the altar in white silk, her expression as cold and perfect as carved ice, her father beside her with that predator's smile that promised wealth and power and absolutely nothing resembling love. Jae-won's father, Kim Dae-soo, the shadow dragon himself, sat in the front row, his face carved from granite, eyes burning with the weight of dynasty and duty. This was his masterpiece. This was the piece he'd orchestrated through blood and steel and 50 years of ruthless calculation. Jae-won reached the altar. Chae-lin's eyes met his, and for a heartbeat, he saw something flicker there. Not love. Recognition, maybe. They were the same, he and her. 2 weapons sharpened by their father's hands. I cannot give you my life, Jae-won said, his voice carrying across the stunned silence of the ballroom. Chae-lin's face didn't change. Then you've just declared war. Jae-won! His father's voice detonated across the room like a grenade. Kim Dae-soo surged to his feet, his enforcers moving instantly to flank him. What are you doing? Jae-won turned to face the man who had made him into a monster. I'm going to my sons. The words landed like a death sentence. You have no sons, Dae-soo snarled, advancing down the aisle. You have duty. You have legacy. You will complete this ceremony. I have twin boys fighting for their lives in Accra. Jae-won cut him off, his voice steel. And their mother might die before I get there. So no, father. I'm done. Dae-soo's hand moved, and suddenly 8 enforcers were closing in from every direction. Jae-won had trained with every single one of them. He'd learned from them, bled with them, killed alongside them. Now they were his cage. The first man reached for him, and Jae-won moved. He caught the enforcer's wrist, twisted, drove his elbow into the man's throat, and used his falling body as a shield against the second attacker. The ballroom erupted into chaos, screaming guests, overturning chairs, the Chae family's security drawing weapons. Jae-won fought like a man with everything to lose. He deflected a baton strike, swept another enforcer's legs, delivered a brutal knee to a third man's ribs. They'd taught him every technique, every pressure point, every killing blow. Now he used it all to escape the empire they'd built around him. A hand caught his shoulder. Minho, his face grim, his fists already bloody. The car's waiting. Northwest exit. They fought back to back through the melee, two brothers against an army. Jaewon felt something crack in his ribs as a punch landed, tasted copper as his lip split, but he kept moving. They burst through the service entrance into the kitchen, scattering terrified staff, crashing through the back loading dock, and into the waiting Mercedes. Minho floored it, tires screaming as they rocketed through Seoul's streets toward Gimpo Airport. Jaewon pressed a hand to his bleeding mouth, his phone already dialing. Get the Gulfstream ready. File for Accra, Ghana. Maximum speed. We leave in 30 minutes. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Jaewon opened it and felt his blood turn to ice. The message was simple. A photo of his face with a red target overlay, and beneath it, 2 lines of text. Kim Jaewon, $10 million. USD, dead or alive. Joint bounty. Kim Syndicate and Che Syndicate. They're not just angry, Minho said quietly, reading over his shoulder. They want you erased. Jaewon stared at the message, then deleted it. Then they'll have to catch me first. He looked out at the Seoul skyline disappearing behind them, the city that had been his kingdom, now his hunting ground. Get me to my sons, Minho. Whatever it takes. The Mercedes screamed toward the airport, and behind them, the empire began to burn. The Gulfstream G650 climbed through Korean airspace at 41,000 feet, leaving Seoul's glittering sprawl behind like a discarded memory. Jaewon sat in the leather captain's chair, his split knuckles wrapped in gauze, his ribs screaming with every breath. 16 hours to Accra. 16 hours while Amma fought for her life and his sons struggled in incubators half a world away. Minho emerged from the cockpit, 2 glasses of whiskey in hand. He set one in front of Jaewon and took the seat across from him, his expression unreadable in the cabin's dim light. So, Minho said finally, you going to tell me who she is? The mother of these twins you just torched your entire life for? Jaewon picked up the glass but didn't drink. Her name is Amma Kofi. That tells me nothing. She was a PhD student, African Business and Economic Development at Yonsei University. Jaewon's voice went somewhere distant. I met her 18 months ago at an exhibition in Insadong. Ancient Ashanti gold artifacts. I was there to meet a weapons dealer. She was there because she actually gave a damn about history. The memory hit him like a fist. Amma standing in front of a glass case containing a golden stool, her natural hair pulled back, her eyes sharp and curious. She'd turned to him, caught him staring, and instead of the usual fear or calculation he saw in people's eyes, she'd smiled. You're wondering if it's real, she'd said, her English carrying that melodic Ghanaian accent. The craftsmanship. It's extraordinary, isn't it? He'd been so thrown by her directness, her lack of pretense, that he'd answered honestly. I was actually wondering how much it would cost to steal. She'd laughed. Actually laughed. Well, at least you're honest. Most men lie in the first 30 seconds. I'm Amma. Jay, he'd said. Just Jay. Not Kim Jaewon, heir to the Kim Syndicate, not the Serpent of Seoul. Just a man standing in front of a woman who made him forget, for one perfect moment, what his hands had done. She saw through you, Minho said. It wasn't a question. Eventually, Jaewon finally took a drink, the whiskey burning. We had a year. 1 year where I got to pretend I was someone else. She knew I had money, knew I was connected to something dangerous, but I kept the details vague. I told her I worked in import-export. She'd roll her eyes and call it bloodless business speak. She was brilliant, Minho, sharp as a blade. She could debate development economics and then turn around and make me laugh at some ridiculous Korean drama we were watching. She made me feel human. What was her tell? Minho asked quietly. The moment she knew, Jaewon closed his eyes. 13 months ago, we were at her apartment in Hongdae. She was making jollof rice, teaching me how to cook it properly, laughing at my terrible knife skills. The news was on in the background. And then they showed it. The memory was acid. The news anchor's voice, clinical and detached, reporting a gang execution in Gangnam. 5 members of a rival syndicate found dead in a shipping container. The camera had briefly shown crime scene footage, the kind of brutal, methodical violence that carried a signature. His signature. She froze. Jaewon continued. Just stopped moving. Then she turned to look at me, and I saw it happen in real time. Her putting it together. The money, the scars, the way I sometimes woke up at night reaching for a gun that wasn't there. She turned off the stove, very carefully, and said, "That was you, wasn't it? The container in Gangnam. What did you say?" I didn't deny it. Couldn't. She looked at me like I was something she'd scraped off her shoe and said, "You're a killer. You made me love a ghost." Jaewon's voice cracked. She told me to leave. I tried to explain, tried to make her understand the world I came from, but she just kept shaking her head. "There's no version of this where you're the good guy, Jae. And there's no version where I can love what you are." She disappeared. Completely. Changed her number, dropped out of the program, vanished like smoke. I looked for her for months. Had people check every airport, every border crossing. Nothing. It was like she'd been erased. Jaewon's hands tightened on the glass. 3 months after she left, one of my intelligence contacts found a sealed medical record. She'd gone to a clinic in Itaewon, pregnancy test, positive. Minho let out a slow breath. "And she never told you. Why would she?" Jaewon's laugh was bitter. "She saw what I was. She knew what kind of father I'd be. So she ran. And she carried my sons alone for 9 months. And now she's dying in a hospital in Accra because I was too much of a coward to choose her when it mattered." The Gulf Stream's engines hummed in the silence. Outside, the night was absolute. "You're choosing now," Minho said quietly. Jaewon looked at his second-in-command, his brother in everything but blood. "I'm 16 hours too late. Then we make up the time." Minho stood, gripped Jaewon's shoulder. "Sleep if you can. We'll be in Accra before you know it." But Jaewon didn't sleep. He sat in the darkness at 41,000 feet, watching the world scroll past below, and prayed to a god he didn't believe in that Amma would live long enough for him to tell her he'd finally chosen right. 16 hours felt like 16 lifetimes. Jaewon watched the sun rise over the Arabian Peninsula, watched it arc across the endless Sahara, watched it begin its descent as the West African coast finally appeared through the Gulf Stream's windows. The pilots had pushed the jet to its absolute limit, burning fuel at a rate that would have made accountants weep, but Jaewon didn't care about money. Money couldn't buy back time. The landing gear descended as Kotoka International Airport came into view, and Jaewon felt his chest constrict. Somewhere down there, in a hospital he'd never seen, Amma was fighting for her life while 2 tiny boys he'd never met struggled to breathe. The weight of it threatened to crush him. The Gulfstream touched down hard, taxiing toward the private terminal. The moment the cabin door opened, heat slammed into Jaewon like a physical force. Accra's humid, diesel-scented air was a world away from Seoul's crisp autumn. He descended the stairs in his rumpled wedding tuxedo, his ribs protesting every movement, his eyes scanning the tarmac. A woman stood beside a battered Toyota sedan, her posture rigid with exhaustion and barely contained rage. She was tall, her natural hair twisted into thick locks, her face a mirror of Amma's but harder, sharper. She wore scrubs splattered with what Jaewon prayed wasn't blood. "Aisha?" he called out. She turned, and the look she gave him could have melted steel. "So you're the man who broke my sister's heart." Not a question. An accusation. "You're late. How is she?" Jaewon closed the distance between them, Minho following close behind. "How are the babies?" "Amma is in a medically induced coma." Aisha's voice was clinical, a nurse delivering a diagnosis. She hemorrhaged during delivery. They managed to stabilize her, but her brain was deprived of oxygen for nearly 4 minutes. "The doctors won't know if there's permanent damage until she wakes up. If she wakes up," the words hit like bullets. Jaewon felt his knees nearly buckle, but he forced himself to remain standing. "And the twins? Jae and Kofi?" Aisha's expression softened fractionally when she said their names. "Born at 30 weeks, 3 months premature. They're in the NICU at Korlobu. Both are on ventilators. Jae weighs 1.3 kilograms. Kofi is even smaller, 1.1. They're fighting pneumonia, underdeveloped lungs, and about a dozen other complications I can't even pronounce." She stepped closer, jabbing a finger into Jaewon's chest. "They might not survive the week, Mr. Kim. So, whatever you came here to do, whatever redemption you're looking for, you better pray it's not too late. Take me to them." Jaewon's voice was raw. "Now." Aisha stared at him for a long moment, measuring him, judging him. Finally, she nodded toward the Toyota. "Get in. And put on your seatbelt. Accra traffic doesn't care that you're having the worst day of your life." The drive through Accra was chaos incarnate. Trotro shared minibuses careened through intersections with reckless abandon. Street vendors dodged between cars, selling everything from phone credit to roasted plantains. Drivers honked incessantly, a constant symphony of aggression and impatience. Jaewon gripped the door handle, his knuckles white, as Aisha navigated the madness with practiced ease. "Amma never told me about you," Aisha said, her eyes on the road. Not directly, but she came home from Seoul broken. Stopped eating, stopped sleeping. She'd sit in church with our parents and just stare at nothing. When she told us she was pregnant, my mother cried for 3 days. My father wanted to know who the father was, but Amma refused to say anything except that he was dangerous and that she would raise the babies alone. "I would have come," Jaewon said quietly. "If I'd known." "Would you?" Aisha cut him off, swerving around a dawdling taxi. "Would you really have left your empire for 2 babies you'd never met? Or would you have sent money and pretended they didn't exist?" Jaewon didn't answer because he didn't know. The man he'd been a day ago might have done exactly that. Korlabu Teaching Hospital loomed ahead, a sprawling complex of white and beige buildings surrounded by palm trees and dust. Aisha pulled into the parking lot, barely waiting for the car to stop before she was out and moving. Jaewon and Minho followed, jogging to keep pace as she led them through crowded corridors that smelled of disinfectant and desperation. "4th floor," Aisha said, hitting the elevator button repeatedly. "NICU. You'll need to scrub in. No jewelry, no phones, no weapons." She glanced at Jaewon's waistline, where the Sig Sauer was still pressed against his ribs. "Yes, I noticed. Leave it with your friend or I'll have security throw you out." The elevator doors opened. Jaewon handed the gun to Minho without a word and stepped inside. When the doors opened on the 4th floor, Aisha led him down a hallway to a pair of double doors marked Neonatal Intensive Care Unit. Through the glass, Jaewon could see rows of incubators, each one containing a tiny, fragile life, tethered to machines by a web of tubes and wires. "They're in there," Aisha said softly. "Incubators 7 and 8. Go meet your sons, Mr. Kim, and pray they recognize something worth fighting for." She pushed open the doors, and Jaewon stepped into the room where 2 boys no bigger than textbooks fought for every breath, and his entire world narrowed to the sound of their struggling hearts. The NICU nurse, a heavy-set woman with kind eyes named Patience, handed Jaewon a surgical mask and pointed him toward the sink. He scrubbed his hands methodically, watching the soap foam turn gray with Seoul's dust and Accra's heat, and the residue of a life he was already leaving behind. His fingers trembled as he dried them. He'd broken men's bones with these hands. He'd pulled triggers, signed death warrants, crushed rivals without hesitation. Now they shook at the thought of touching his sons. "Incubators 7 and 8, Patience said gently, guiding him past rows of tiny, struggling lives. "Jay is on the left, Kofi on the right. You can touch them through the porthole gloves, but be gentle. Their skin is still paper thin." Jaewon approached the dual incubators and his heart stopped. They were impossibly small. No bigger than textbooks, as Aisha had said. But even that description didn't capture the devastating fragility of them. Jay lay on his back, his chest rising and falling with mechanical precision as the ventilator forced air into lungs that weren't ready for the world. His skin was translucent, veins visible like a roadmap of vulnerability. A feeding tube snaked into his nose. Monitors tracked every heartbeat, every breath, every moment of his fight for survival. Kofi was even tinier, curled on his side in his incubator, his body no bigger than Jaewon's forearm. His eyes were fused shut, his fingers impossibly perfect, impossibly small, curled into fists the size of grapes. The ventilator tube looked obscene against his face, a brutal invasion of something too pure to be touched by machinery. Both of them wore tiny knitted caps, one blue, one green. Someone, probably Amma, probably in those last conscious moments before the hemorrhage had made sure they wouldn't be cold. Jaewon's vision blurred. He pressed his hands against the incubator glass, desperate to get closer, and Patience gently guided his hands into the porthole gloves. "Talk to them," she said softly. "They know their father's voice, even if they've never heard it before." Jaewon slid his hands through the sterile gloves and touched Jay first. His finger barely grazed the boy's palm, and something miraculous happened. Those tiny fingers, those impossibly fragile fingers, closed around Jaewon's pinky in a grip that felt like the entire weight of the universe. "Jay," Jaewon whispered, his voice breaking. "I'm here. I'm sorry I'm late, but I'm here now." The monitors beeped steadily. Jay's chest rose and fell. His grip tightened fractionally, and Jaewon felt something inside him crack wide open. He moved to Kofi's incubator, slipping his other hand through the glove, and touched his second son with the same reverent terror. Kofi's skin was warm beneath his finger, impossibly soft, and when Jaewon stroked his tiny arm, the boy shifted slightly, turning toward the touch like a flower toward sunlight. "Kofi," Jaewon breathed. "God, you're so small. You're both so small." He stood there between them, one hand touching each son, and the full reality of what he'd abandoned crashed over him like a tidal wave. These were his children, his blood, two tiny humans who existed because he'd loved a woman he'd been too cowardly to choose. They were fighting to breathe, fighting to live, fighting battles they shouldn't have to fight because their father was a monster who'd chosen power over love. "I'm sorry," Jaewon said, tears streaming down his face behind the surgical mask. "I'm so sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry your mother had to carry you alone. I'm sorry you came into this world fighting for your lives because I was too afraid to be your father." Jay's fingers tightened around his pinky. Kofi's monitors beeped steadily, his tiny chest rising and falling with the ventilator's rhythm. Jaewon looked from one son to the other. These two impossibly small warriors who'd been born into a war they didn't choose. And something fundamental shifted inside him. The serpent of soul, the heir to an empire built on blood and steel. The man who'd killed without hesitation, all of it burned away in the presence of two boys who weighed less than 3 kilograms combined. He leaned closer to both incubators, his voice fierce and unshakable despite the tears. "Listen to me," he said. "Both of you. I don't know if you can hear me, but I need you to know this. You fight to breathe, and I will tear down the world to keep you safe. Every empire, every enemy, every man who would hurt you, I will destroy them all. My father put a $10 million bounty on my head, and I don't care. The entire underworld of Seoul wants me dead, and I don't care, because you two are worth more than all of it." He touched each of them gently, reverently, memorizing the feel of their skin against his fingers. "You are Jae and Kofi Kim," he whispered. "You are my sons, and I promise you, on everything I am and everything I will never be again, that you will grow up free of the blood on my hands. You will never know the violence that made me. You will have a father who chooses you first, every single time, no matter what it costs me." The monitors beeped, the ventilators hummed, and between two incubators in a hospital in Accra, Kim Jaewon made a vow that would destroy everything he'd ever been and remake him into something he'd never imagined he could become. A father. Outside the NICU, Minho stood in the hallway, and even from a distance, he could see it happen. He could see the moment his Hyungnim stopped being the serpent and became something infinitely more dangerous and infinitely more vulnerable. A man with everything to lose, and nothing left to protect but love. Dr. Emmanuel Essien looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days, which, Jaewon suspected, was probably accurate. The lead ICU physician was a compact man with graying temples and the kind of exhaustion that came from fighting death and losing more often than winning. He met Jaewon outside the ICU on the 3rd floor, clipboard in hand, his expression grave. "Mr. Kim," Dr. Essien said, his English carrying the precise diction of British medical training. "I understand you've just seen your sons. Now I need to speak with you about their mother." Jaewon steeled himself. "Tell me." "Miss Kofi experienced a massive postpartum hemorrhage during delivery. We're talking about blood loss in excess of 2 liters. Her uterus failed to contract properly after the twins were delivered, and by the time we got her to surgery, she'd gone into hypovolemic shock." Dr. Essien's voice was clinical, but his eyes held sympathy. "We managed to stop the bleeding and stabilize her, but her brain was deprived of oxygen for approximately 3 to 4 minutes. We've induced a medical coma to give her body time to heal and to prevent further cerebral edema." "Brain damage?" The words tasted like ash. "We won't know until she wakes up. If she wakes up, the next 48 to 72 hours are critical. Her vitals are stable for now, but Mr. Kim, you need to understand she may not be the same woman you knew. There could be cognitive deficits, memory loss, motor function impairment, or," he paused, "she may not wake up at all." Jaewon felt the hospital corridor tilt. "Can I see her?" "Room 302. But Mr. Kim, you should know her family is in there, and they are not pleased with your arrival." The ICU room was dim, lit only by the glow of monitors and the fading Accra sunlight filtering through partially closed blinds. Amma lay in the bed, impossibly still, her beautiful face slack with unconsciousness. Tubes ran from her arms. A ventilator breathed for her. The woman who'd laughed at his terrible knife skills, who debated economic policy with fire in her eyes, who'd made him feel human reduced to this. But it was the three people standing around her bed who made Jaewon's blood run cold. An older woman, Amma's mother, clearly, with the same high cheekbones and intelligent eyes, sat in a chair holding Amma's hand, tears streaming silently down her face. Aisha stood at the foot of the bed, arms crossed, her expression murderous, and at the head of the bed, tall and imposing in a dark suit despite the heat, stood a man who could only be Amma's father. Pastor Solomon Kofi was a giant of a man, easily 6'4", with shoulders that suggested a youth spent doing physical labor before he'd found God. His face was carved teak, his eyes sharp and unforgiving behind wire-rimmed glasses. When Jaewon entered, those eyes locked onto him with the precision of a sniper's scope. "So," Pastor Kofi said, his voice a deep rumble that filled the small room, "you're the dangerous man." It wasn't a question. Jaewon met his gaze and nodded. "Yes, sir. My daughter wouldn't tell us your name, wouldn't tell us where you were from, what you did, why she ran from Seoul like the devil himself was chasing her." The pastor moved around the bed, each step deliberate. "But she told me you were dangerous, that you lived in a world of violence, that our grandsons would never be safe if you were in their lives." "She was right," Jaewon said quietly. "Then why are you here?" The pastor's voice could have cut steel. "Why did you come halfway across the world to stand in this room? To what ease your conscience? To play father for a day before you disappear back to whatever hell you crawled out of?" Jaewon looked at Amma's unconscious form, then back at her father. Every instinct screamed at him to fight back, to defend himself, to use his words like weapons the way he'd been trained. But he'd made a vow in the NICU, and that vow started here. "I came because I'm a coward," Jaewon said, and his voice cracked. "I came because your daughter loved me when I didn't deserve it, and I was too afraid to choose her over the empire my father built. I let her run. I let her carry my sons alone for 9 months. I let her come here and nearly die bringing them into the world, and I wasn't there to hold her hand or tell her she was the bravest person I'd ever known." He took a step closer, ignoring the way Aisha tensed, like she might physically throw him out. "I destroyed my wedding today," Jaewon continued. "I walked away from an $800 million alliance. I fought my father's enforcers and got on a plane with a $10 million bounty on my head because my sons were dying and Amma was dying, and I finally understood what it meant to choose." He looked Pastor Kofi directly in the eyes. "I chose them. I chose all 3 of them. And I'm not leaving, not ever, not even if you throw me out of this room. I will sleep in the hallway. I will wait outside, but I am not abandoning them again." Pastor Kofi studied him for a long moment, and Jaewon felt himself being weighed, measured, judged by a man whose moral authority made syndicate bosses look like children playing dress-up. "You say you're dangerous," the pastor said finally. "Will that danger follow you here? Will it threaten my grandsons?" "Yes," Jaewon wouldn't lie. "Not now. My father and the syndicate I betrayed will come looking for me. They'll send men. They'll offer money. They'll do whatever it takes to make me pay for what I've done. But I swear to you, on everything I am, I will destroy every single one of them before they touch Jay or Kofi or Amma. I will burn down my entire world to keep them safe." The silence stretched. Then Amma's mother spoke, her voice soft but firm. "Solomon, let him stay." The pastor turned to his wife, surprised. "Grace, our daughter loved him," Grace Kofi said, still holding Amma's hand. "Whatever he was, whatever he did, she loved him enough to break her own heart rather than change him. And now he's here. He flew across the world. He's standing in this room promising to die for our grandbabies." She looked at Jaewon with eyes that saw everything. "Let him prove it." Pastor Kofi's jaw worked. Finally, he nodded curtly and stepped aside. "You may stay, but you will not touch her. You will not speak to her. You will sit in that chair in the corner and you will pray. Mr. Kim, pray that God is more merciful than I am." "Thank you," Jaewon whispered. He took the chair in the corner and began his vigil. For 48 hours, Jaewon lived in that chair. He left only to scrub in and visit the twins, spending 30 minutes at a time touching them through the incubator gloves, whispering promises he intended to keep. The rest of the time, he sat and watched Amma breathe. Her family came and went, her mother staying most nights, her father visiting during the day, Aisha appearing for her nursing shifts with death in her eyes. On the second night, when the family had finally gone home to rest, and only the night nurse remained, Jaewon moved his chair closer to Amma's bed. He reached through the side rails and took her hand, careful of the IV line. "Amma," he he said softly. I don't know if you can hear me. I don't know if you even want to hear me. But I need to tell you this. Her monitors beeped steadily. The ventilator hissed. I was a coward. You were right about everything. I was a killer. I was a monster. I made you love someone who didn't exist. And when you saw the truth, I let you go because I was terrified of choosing you and failing. His voice broke. But I'm choosing now. I chose you the moment I answered that phone call. I chose you when I walked away from that altar. I chose you when I fought my way onto that plane. I chose you, Amma. I chose all three of you, and I'm ready to destroy my entire world to prove it. He leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching her hand. Our sons are beautiful. They're tiny and they're fighting so hard, and they have your strength. Jay has your determination. He grips my finger like he's already trying to hold on to the world. Kofi has your gentleness. He turns toward touch like he knows love when he feels it. Tears streamed down Jaewon's face. They need you, Amma. I need you. Please come back. Please let me spend the rest of my life making up for the coward I was. Please let me be the man you tried to love. The monitors beeped, the ventilator hissed, and Kim Jae-won sat in the darkness, holding the hand of the woman he'd failed, and waited for absolution he didn't deserve. Then, at 3:47 a.m. on the third day, something changed. Amma's fingers twitched. Just slightly. Just enough. Jaewon's head snapped up. Amma? Her eyelids fluttered. The monitors began to beep faster as her heart rate increased. The night nurse rushed over, checking readings, adjusting equipment, her movements efficient and calm despite the sudden activity. Miss Kofi, can you hear me? The nurse called out. Amma's eyes opened, slowly, painfully, like a woman swimming up from the bottom of the ocean. Her gaze was unfocused at first, wandering around the room before finally, impossibly, landing on Jaewon's face. She stared at him for a long moment. Then, her voice barely a whisper, hoarse from the ventilator tube that had just been removed, she spoke. You chose us. Not a question, a statement. You chose all three of us. Jaewon's vision blurred with tears. Yes, every time, forever. Amma's eyes drifted closed again, but this time it was different. This time it was sleep, not unconsciousness. Healing sleep. Her hand squeezed his, just once, before she drifted off. And in a hospital room in Accra, as the city began to wake outside, Kim Jae-won finally understood what redemption felt like. Amma woke fully on the fourth day, and the doctors called it a miracle. Her vitals had strengthened overnight, her cognitive functions tested normal, and by afternoon Dr. Essien cautiously declared her stable enough to be moved. Not home, not yet, but somewhere she desperately needed to be. I want to see my sons, she said, her voice still hoarse but carrying that familiar steel, Jaewon remembered. I want to see Jay and Kofi. Pastor Kofi had protested, Grace had worried, Ayesha had warned about infection risks and exhaustion, but Amma had fixed each of them with the same unyielding stare that had once made Jaewon confess his thoughts about stealing ancient artifacts, and one by one, they'd yielded. Now, two nurses carefully wheeled her bed through the corridors of Korlabu, 4 poles clattering, monitors beeping, Jaewon walking beside her with his hand wrapped around hers. Her family followed at a respectful distance, and Minho brought up the rear, his eyes constantly scanning, his posture tense in a way that made Jaewon's instincts scream. The NICU doors opened, and patients smiled warmly at the procession. They've been waiting for you, Mama. They positioned Amma's bed between incubators 7 and 8, so she could see both boys at once. For a long moment, she just stared, her breathing shallow, her free hand pressed to her mouth, tears streamed down her face, but she didn't make a sound. Jay and Kofi had improved in the 4 days since their birth. Still impossibly small, still tethered to ventilators and monitors, but their skin had pinked up slightly. Their movements were stronger. The doctors spoke cautiously about progress, about hope, about the long road ahead. Can I touch them? Amma whispered. Of course, Patience said gently, helping Amma sit up slightly and guiding her hands into the incubator gloves. Amma's right hand slipped through to touch Jay. Her left reached for Kofi. The moment her fingers made contact with their skin, something profound happened in that sterile room. Jaewon watched her face transform, watched pain and fear and exhaustion burn away in the presence of an emotion so overwhelming it had no name. It was love, yes, but it was more than that. It was recognition. It was completion. It was a mother meeting the pieces of her soul that had been living outside her body. "Oh," Amma breathed, and it was a sound of wonder and heartbreak and ferocious joy all at once. "Oh, my beautiful boys. My Jay. My Kofi. Mama's here now. Mama's here." Jay's tiny fingers closed around hers, just as they'd closed around Jaewon's days before. Kofi shifted in his incubator, turning toward her touch with that same instinctive recognition of love. Amma sobbed openly, her shoulders shaking, but she never stopped touching them, never stopped whispering to them in a mixture of English and what Jaewon recognized as Twi. "They know you," Jaewon said softly, standing behind her bed. "They've been waiting for you." Amma turned to look at him, and her expression was complex gratitude and anger and love and loss all tangled together. "We made them, Jay. We made 2 perfect, fighting, beautiful boys." Her voice broke. "We made an army. We made a future." "Yes," Jaewon said, his own tears falling freely. "We did." She held their sons for 20 minutes, speaking to them in soft, fierce tones, telling them about their grandmother's cooking and their grandfather's church, and their Aunt Aisha's terrible sense of humor. She told them about Ghana, about the ocean at Kokrobite Beach, about the markets in Makola, where she'd buy them the sweetest mangoes when they were old enough to eat them. She promised them a life, a real life, full of love and safety and all the things she'd dreamed about during 9 months of carrying them alone. Jaewon stood behind her, one hand on her shoulder, watching his sons respond to their mother's voice, and for one perfect moment, the world was exactly as it should be. Then Minho appeared in the doorway of the NICU, and the expression on his face shattered everything. Jaewon met him outside, his heart already sinking. "What is it?" "We have a problem." Minho pulled out his phone, showing Jaewon a series of surveillance photos he'd taken outside the hospital. "I've been monitoring the area since we arrived. These men showed up 6 hours ago. I recognize 3 of them, your father's veteran security team. The others are Che Syndicate, mercenaries, South African, based on their gear." The photos showed at least 8 men positioned at various points around Korlebu's campus. "Watching, waiting. They're not moving in?" Jaewon asked. "Not yet. They're watching the hospital, tracking who comes and goes. They know you're here, Hyungnim. They're probably waiting for confirmation that Amma and the twins are stable enough to use as leverage." Minho's voice was grim. "Or they're waiting for orders to move in and eliminate the problem permanently." Jaewon felt his blood turn to ice. "How long until they make a move?" 12 hours, maybe less. They'll want to act tonight when the hospital is less crowded, when witnesses are minimal." Minho gripped Jaewon's shoulder. "This place is a trap. We need to move them. Now." "Move them where?" "Amma just woke up 4 days after nearly dying. The twins are on ventilators. They can't." "They have to," Minho cut him off. "Because in 12 hours, those men will come through these doors, and they won't care about doctors or nurses or sick babies. They'll do whatever it takes to complete their mission. You know this. You trained with some of them." Jaewon looked through the NICU window at Amma, still touching their sons, still whispering promises of a future she believed in, the future he'd promised to tear down the world to protect. "There's a private medical facility in the cantonments area," Minho continued. "High-end, discreet, used by diplomats and corporate executives. I've already made contact. They have a NICU unit. They can accommodate Amma's recovery, and more importantly, I can secure it. But we need to move fast. The longer we stay here, the more danger we put everyone in, including Amma's family." Jaewon's mind raced through tactical scenarios, through risk assessments, through all the cold calculations that had kept him alive in Seoul's underworld. Every scenario ended the same way. Staying at Korlebu meant exposing everyone to violence. Moving meant risking the twins' fragile lives. There was no good choice. But there was a right choice. "How long to arrange transport?" Jaewon asked. 2 hours for a secure medical transport vehicle. I'll need to pay off some people, grease some wheels, but I can have everything ready by sunset." "Do it." Jaewon looked at his second in command. "And Minho?" "Tell the facility we're bringing 5 people. Amma, the twins, and Aisha. She's their nurse. She comes with us." Minho nodded and disappeared down the corridor, phone already to his ear. Jaewon stood at the NICU window, watching Amma with their sons, and felt the weight of Seoul's shadow falling across Ghana's sun. He'd known this moment would come. He'd known the violence would follow him. He'd just hoped foolishly, desperately, that he'd have more time. But time was a luxury men like him never got. He walked back into the NICU, steeling himself for the conversation that would break Amma's heart and prove that the dangerous man she'd run from in Seoul had followed her all the way to Accra. The war had come home, and this time, Jaewon would make sure he was the only casualty that mattered. Jaewon waited until Amma had finished saying goodbye to the twins for the moment, until the nurses had gently suggested she rest, until she was back in her room with only him and the quiet hum of monitors. Then he closed the door and told her the truth. "We need to move you and the boys, tonight." Amma stared at him from her hospital bed, her face still pale from blood loss, her body still recovering from the trauma of nearly dying. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, very quietly, very dangerously, she spoke. "No. Amma, listen to me. No." Her voice was stronger now, edged with fury. "I have listened to you. I listened when you told me you worked in import-export. I listened when you made promises you couldn't keep. I listened when you walked away from that altar and flew here like some kind of savior." She struggled to sit up straighter, wincing with pain. "I will not listen while you tell me we're moving my sons. My sons, Jay and Kofi, are 3 days old. They weigh less than 1.5 kilograms each. They're on ventilators. They have feeding tubes and monitors and a dozen medications keeping them alive. And you want to move them?" "I don't want to," Jaewon said, his voice strained. "I have to." "Then leave." Amma's eyes blazed. "Leave us here. Go back to Seoul, go to hell. Go wherever men like you go when they've destroyed everything they touch. But leave my sons out of whatever war you brought to my doorstep." "I can't." Jaewon moved closer to her bed, his hands clenched at his sides. "Amma, there are 8 men outside this hospital right now. 8 highly trained killers sent by my father and the Che Syndicate to find me. They know I'm here. They know about you and the twins. And they will use all 3 of you to draw me out. Let them." Amma's voice cracked. "Give yourself up. Trade your life for theirs. Isn't that what a father does? It won't work that way." Jaewon's voice was raw. "You don't understand how these people think. My father doesn't want justice. He wants me to suffer. The Che family doesn't want revenge on me alone. They want to send a message to anyone who would dare break an alliance." He forced himself to hold her gaze. "If they get their hands on Jay and Kofi, they won't kill them quickly. They'll use them as leverage for months, maybe years. They'll make me watch them suffer. And when they're done with me, they'll eliminate the evidence. All of it." Amma's face went ashen. "You're lying." "I wish I was." Jaewon pulled out his phone, showed her the surveillance photos Minho had taken. "These men aren't here to negotiate. They're here to complete a mission. And that mission ends with everyone I care about dead or in chains." Amma stared at the photos, her hands trembling. When she looked up, there were tears streaming down her face. "This is what you are. This is what I ran from. This is why I never told you about the pregnancy. I know. And now my sons, our sons, are targets because their father is a monster." "Yes." Jaewon's voice broke. "Yes, Amma. That's exactly what they are. And I will spend the rest of my life hating myself for it. But right now, in this moment, the only thing that matters is getting them somewhere safe. I have a secure facility ready. Private medical staff, full NICU capabilities. Ayesha can come with us. Your family can visit once we're sure it's secure. But we have to move. Now. Tonight." Amma closed her eyes, her chest heaving with barely controlled sobs. "They could die, Jay. Moving them could kill them. The stress, the transport, the change in environment, doctor. Essien said they need stability. They need to stay in those incubators for weeks, maybe months. If we stay here, they'll definitely die." Jaewon knelt beside her bed, his voice desperate. "Amma, please. I know you hate me. I know you wish you'd never met me. I know every single instinct you have is telling you to push me away and handle this yourself. But you can't. Not this time. This threat is global. It's professional. It's the kind of violence you can't pray away or reason with or escape from." He reached for her hand, and she didn't pull away. "Let me do this one thing right. Let me protect them." The silence stretched between them, filled only by the sound of her ragged breathing and the steady beep of monitors. Finally, Amma opened her eyes. The look she gave him was colder than anything he'd faced in Seoul's underworld. "If we do this, if I agree to move my babies, you need to understand something, Kim Jae-won." She gripped his hand with surprising strength. "If one hair on their heads is harmed because of the blood on your hands, I will pray to God every day to see you die. I will pray for your suffering. I will pray that every moment of peace you ever hope to find turns to ash. Do you understand me?" Yes, Jaewon whispered. I mean it. Her voice shook with emotion. I loved you once. I loved you so much it nearly destroyed me. But I love them more. I will always love them more. And if your violence touches them, if your world infects their innocent lives, I will hate you with every breath I take until the day I die. I understand. Amma released his hand and turned her face away. Then get us out of here. The rainstorm hit Accra at 11 p.m., arriving with the sudden violence that characterized West African weather. Thunder shook the hospital windows. Lightning turned the night into day for brief, blinding moments. The streets flooded within minutes, and traffic ground to a halt as the city's drainage system struggled to keep up. It was perfect cover. Minho had arranged everything with terrifying efficiency. A private ambulance, specially equipped for neonatal transport, waited in Korean underground loading dock. 2 incubators on backup power. A mobile ventilator system, portable monitors. Aisha, grim-faced and professional, had supervised the medical preparations personally. This is insane, she muttered, checking Jay's vitals one last time. This is absolutely insane. I know, Jaewon said. If they crash during transport, I know. Aisha turned to him, her expression fierce. You better be worth it, Kim Jaewon. You better be worth all of this. He didn't answer because they both knew he wasn't. They moved in stages. First the twins, secured in their transport incubators, wheeled through corridors by nurses who'd been paid generously for their silence. Then Amma, transferred to a gurney, her face pale with fear and fury. Minho led the way, his weapon hidden but ready, his eyes scanning every shadow. The loading dock was chaos rain hammering the concrete, water streaming from overwhelmed gutters, the ambulance's lights cutting through the downpour like knives. They loaded the incubators first, Aisha climbing in with them, her hands never leaving their monitoring equipment. Then Amma, lifted carefully by 2 orderlies who disappeared the moment she was secured. Jaewon climbed in last, taking the seat beside Amma's gurney. Through the ambulance's rear windows, he saw Minho directing 3 additional security vehicles into position. They weren't just escaping. They were running a tactical convoy through a storm. Go, Minho ordered the driver, then climbed into the lead security vehicle. The ambulance lurched forward into the Accra night, rain pounding against its roof like artillery fire. Inside, Jay and Kofi's monitors beeped steadily. Amma gripped the side rail of her gurney, her eyes closed, her lips moving in silent prayer. Jaewon looked at his family, his broken, terrified, impossibly precious family, and made a promise to the storm outside. He would end this. He would burn down everything his father had built. He would destroy every bridge back to Seoul, and he would make sure that when the smoke cleared, the only Kim left standing was the father his sons deserved. The ambulance roared through flooded streets toward cantonments, carrying the future Kim Jaewon would kill to protect. The villa in cantonments was a fortress disguised as luxury. 3 stories of white concrete and bulletproof glass, surrounded by walls topped with electric fencing, monitored by cameras Minho had personally installed. The private medical facility occupied the entire 2nd floor, a fully equipped NICU, recovery rooms, and a staff of 3 nurses and 1 neonatologist who'd been paid enough to ask no questions and maintain absolute discretion. For 5 days, they lived in a strange, tense domesticity that felt like the eye of a hurricane. Jaewon learned to be a father in that villa. He learned to scrub in properly, to check the twins' monitors without triggering alarms, to change diapers the size of his palm on babies who weighed less than a bag of rice. He learned to recognize Jay's particular cry, sharp and demanding, versus Kofi's softer, more hesitant sounds. He learned to hold them during their brief moments off the ventilator, supporting their impossibly fragile necks, feeling their hearts beat against his chest like trapped birds. Amma healed slowly, her body recovering even as her spirit remained fractured. She spent hours in the NICU, touching her sons, singing to them in Twi, telling them stories about the grandfather they'd meet and the country they'd grow up in. She barely looked at Jaewon. When she did, her eyes held a mixture of gratitude and resentment that cut deeper than any blade. Minho coordinated security with military precision, rotating guards, encrypted communications, false trails planted across Accra to throw off the hunters. He'd confirmed that the 8 men from Korle-Bu had lost them in the rainstorm evacuation, but he knew they all knew it was only a matter of time before the net tightened again. On the 6th evening, Jaewon stood on the villa's secured balcony, watching Accra's lights flicker in the distance. The twins had been stable all day. Amma had smiled, actually smiled, when Kofi had gripped her finger. For a moment, He'd allowed himself to believe they might actually survive this. Then Amma stepped onto the balcony behind him, and he knew the moment of peace was over. "We can't live like this," she said without preamble. Jaewon turned to face her. She looked stronger now, the color returning to her face, but there was steel in her posture that hadn't been there before. Motherhood had forged something unbreakable in her. "I know," he said. "No, I don't think you do." Amma moved to the railing, keeping distance between them. "You think if we hide long enough, if Minho builds walls high enough, if you throw enough money at the problem, eventually they'll give up and go home. But they won't, will they? No. Your father will keep hunting. The Che family will keep hunting. And one day, those walls won't be high enough, and my sons will pay the price for having you as a father." Her voice shook with controlled fury. "You can't just outrun him, Jae. You have to destroy him." "I can't just kill him," Jaewon said quietly. "Even if I went back to Seoul and put a bullet in his head, the syndicate would continue. Someone else would take over. The bounty would remain. The threat would never end." "Then don't kill him." Amma turned to face him fully, and her expression was fierce. "Destroy him. Make your life mean less to him than the cost of the bounty. Make finding you not worth the effort. Make the entire enterprise collapse, so that hunting you becomes impossible because there's no empire left to fund it." Jaewon stared at her, his mind racing. "You're talking about dismantling everything, the entire syndicate. I'm talking about giving my sons a future." Amma's voice broke. "I'm talking about making it so that when they grow up and ask about their father, I can tell them you loved them enough to burn down your entire world. Because right now you're just a man who brought violence to their doorstep and built a prettier cage." She left him on the balcony, and Jaewon stood there as the night deepened, her words echoing in his mind. Make your life mean less than the cost of the bounty. Destroy him. And suddenly, with the clarity of desperation, Jaewon saw exactly what he had to do. For 3 days, Jaewon barely slept. He locked himself in the villa's study, surrounded by laptops and encrypted hard drives, and began compiling everything he knew about the Kim Syndicate's operations. Not rumors, not hearsay, hard evidence. He accessed financial records he'd kept as insurance, detailing decades of money laundering through shell corporations in Singapore, the Cayman Islands, and Luxembourg. Wire transfers, bank accounts, names, amounts, an undeniable paper trail of hundreds of millions of dollars in illicit funds. He pulled up shipping manifests for drug routes: heroin from the Golden Triangle, methamphetamine from clandestine labs in North Hwanghae Province, fentanyl precursors from Chinese suppliers. Dates, ports, contact names. Enough evidence to dismantle trafficking operations across 3 continents. He compiled murder orders, digital records of assassinations his father had ordered, complete with payments, target photographs, and confirmation of completion. Politicians, rival gang members, journalists who'd gotten too close. A catalog of death stretching back 15 years. He documented protection rackets, human trafficking operations, weapons smuggling, and political corruption. Every dirty secret, every buried body, every crime the Kim Syndicate had committed while hiding behind legitimate business fronts. And then, when he had assembled an unassailable mountain of evidence, Jaewon did the one thing that would make it all undeniable. He recorded his confession. He sat in front of a camera, wearing a simple black shirt, his face clearly visible, and spent 30 minutes methodically detailing his role in the Kim Syndicate. His voice never wavered. He named names. He described operations. He took responsibility for his part in murders, in violence, in the machinery of organized crime. He didn't excuse. He didn't minimize. He simply told the truth. "My name is Kim Jaewon," he said into the camera. "I am the son of Kim Dae-soo, head of the Kim Syndicate in Seoul, South Korea. For 28 years, I have been an active participant in organized crime. The evidence you're seeing alongside this confession represents decades of criminal activity by my family's organization. I am releasing this not for redemption, but because the empire my father built must end. It ends now. It ends with me." When he finished recording, Jaewon sat in the silence of the study, staring at the files on his screen. This would destroy everything. His father would go to prison. The syndicate would collapse. Associates would scatter. Assets would be seized. 50 years of criminal enterprise would be obliterated. And Jaewon himself would become worthless. A traitor. A rat. An exile with no power, no connections, no value to anyone. Exactly what he needed to be. Minho found him at 3 a.m., still sitting at the desk. "Hyungnim, you haven't slept in days. I need you to do something for me," Jaewon said. "I need you to deliver this package simultaneously to Interpol's Seoul office, the Korean National Police, the FBI's Transnational Crime Division, and every major news outlet in South Korea, time-stamped, encrypted until the moment of release. And then I need you to make sure it goes live at exactly 9 a.m. Seoul time tomorrow." Minho looked at the files on the screen, and his face went pale. "You're burning it all down." "Yes. Your father will. My father will go to prison." Jaewon cut him off. "The syndicate will collapse. The bounty will become meaningless because there will be no organization left to pay it, and I will become a ghost, a traitor worth less than nothing to anyone in that world." "And you?" Minho asked quietly. Jaewon looked toward the ceiling, toward the second floor, where his sons slept in their incubators, where Amma recovered, where the fragile family he'd created fought to survive. "I become their father," he said. "Nothing more, nothing less." Minho was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached out, gripped Jaewon's shoulder, and nodded. "I'll make the arrangements." At 9:02 a.m. Seoul time, the world exploded. Every major news outlet in South Korea led with the same story: the complete exposure of the Kim syndicate. Interpol issued arrest warrants for 47 individuals. The Korean National Police launched coordinated raids across Seoul. Financial institutions froze hundreds of accounts. And at the center of it all was Kim Jae-won's confession video, playing on loop, his face calm and his voice steady as he dismantled his father's empire with surgical precision. Jae-won watched the news feeds from the villa's study, Amma standing in the doorway behind him. Neither of them spoke as they watched decades of power and violence collapse in real time. His phone buzzed. A Seoul number. His father. Jae-won answered. "You destroyed me." Kim Dae-soo's voice was barely human, raw with rage and disbelief. "You destroyed everything. 50 years. Gone because my son is a coward and a traitor." "I destroyed a criminal empire," Jae-won said quietly. "I destroyed the machine that made me a monster. And I made sure that my sons will never have to live in the shadow of what you built." "Your sons?" His father laughed, bitter and broken. "You've made them the sons of a rat. The sons of nothing." "Good," Jae-won said. "That's exactly what I want them to be. The sons of a man who chose them over everything else." He ended the call and turned off his phone. On the television, Interpol agents were leading his father out of the Kim family compound in handcuffs. The empire was burning, the syndicate was finished, and Kim Jae-won, for the first time in his life, was free. The world didn't stop when an empire fell. It accelerated. Within 12 hours of the confession's release, Seoul descended into controlled chaos. Jae-won watched it all unfold from the villa's study, multiple news feeds streaming simultaneously across laptop screens, each one showing a different angle of the same catastrophic collapse. CNN International led with drone footage of the Kim family compound in Gangnam, now surrounded by armored police vehicles and Interpol agents. The ancestral estate, 50 years of accumulated power made manifest in stone and steel, had been breached in less than an hour. Officers emerged carrying boxes of evidence, hard drives, file cabinets, everything his father had built, catalogued and prepared for prosecution. BBC World News showed the arrests happening in real time. 47 individuals, just as Interpol had promised. Syndicate lieutenants dragged from luxury apartments, accountants pulled from their offices in the financial district, corrupt officials taken into custody before they could flee. The entire infrastructure of the Kim syndicate, dismantled with surgical precision. Korean news channels played his confession video on loop, dissecting every word, every revelation. Legal experts debated the implications. Former prosecutors called it the most comprehensive organized crime disclosure in South Korean history. Victims' families appeared on television, crying with relief that justice might finally come for the violence that had stolen their loved ones. And through it all, one image repeated across every channel: Kim Dae-soo, the shadow dragon himself, being led out of the compound in handcuffs. His face was a mask of fury and disbelief, his expensive suit rumpled, his hands bound. The man who'd ruled Seoul's underworld for 5 decades, reduced to just another criminal being processed by the system he'd corrupted. Jae-won felt nothing watching it. No satisfaction, no regret, just the hollow certainty that this was the price of his son's future. His phone rang again, the same Seoul number, his father's lawyer, probably, with access to a prison phone. Jae-won almost didn't answer. But some part of him, the part that had spent 28 years under Kim Dae-soo's shadow, needed to hear it one last time. "Yes," he said. "You destroyed me." His father's voice was shredded, barely recognizable. Not rage anymore. Something worse. Anguish. "You didn't just betray the family, you annihilated it. 50 years of work, 50 years of sacrifice. Your grandfather built this empire from nothing, and you burned it to ash in one day. You built it on corpses," Jaewon said quietly. "On drugs and violence and blood. I just made sure the world could see what it really was." "For what?" Daesu's voice cracked. "For a woman who ran from you? For bastard children you'll never be able to protect? You think this makes you noble? You think this makes you clean?" "No," Jaewon said. "I'll never be clean. But my sons will be. They'll grow up free of this, free of you, free of everything you made me into. They'll be the sons of a traitor," his father spat. "The sons of the man who destroyed his own blood. When they're old enough to understand what you did, they'll hate you more than I do." Jaewon closed his eyes. "Maybe. But they'll be alive to hate me, and that's enough." "You're dead to me," Daesu said. "You were my son, my heir, my legacy. And now you're nothing, less than nothing. When I get out—" "You won't," Jaewon interrupted. "The evidence I provided guarantees life sentences for everyone in leadership. You'll die in prison, father. And the Kim Syndicate will die with you." The silence on the other end stretched for a long moment. When his father spoke again, his voice was hollow. "I hope your sons haunt you the way you'll haunt me. I hope every time you look at them, you remember what you destroyed to buy their safety. I hope it eats you alive." "It will," Jaewon said honestly. "Goodbye, father." He ended the call and blocked the number. On the screen, news anchors were already moving to the next story. The world had witnessed the fall of a criminal empire and was already forgetting it, moving on to the next crisis, the next scandal. In 3 months, the Kim Syndicate would be a footnote. In a year, most people would struggle to remember the name. That was exactly what Jaewon needed. The negotiations took 3 days. Jaewon sat across a video conference link from 2 Interpol senior agents, a representative from the Korean Justice Ministry, and a lawyer from the Ghanaian government. Minho had arranged everything, including encrypted connections that couldn't be traced back to the villa. "Mr. Kim," the lead Interpol agent, a severe German woman named Hoffman, began. "Your confession and the evidence you provided represent the most significant intelligence breakthrough in transnational organized crime in the past decade. 47 arrests, over $300 million in seized assets, trafficking routes disrupted across 3 continents. You've done extraordinary damage to criminal networks that have operated with impunity for years." "I didn't do it for you," Jaewon said flatly. "We understand that. But the fact remains that you are also, by your own admission, guilty of numerous crimes. Murder, conspiracy, money laundering, racketeering. You've confessed to activities that would normally result in life imprisonment, which is why we're negotiating." Hoffman's expression didn't change. "You want immunity." "I want to never set foot in South Korea again," Jaewon said. "I want complete political immunity from the Ghanaian government, guaranteeing I can remain here with my family without threat of extradition. And I want an agreement with Interpol that I will cooperate fully, providing testimony, intelligence, and any additional evidence you require, but only remotely. I will never return to Seoul. I will never be placed in a situation where the remnants of my father's network can reach me." The Korean Justice Ministry representative, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, leaned forward. "You understand you're demanding we let a confessed murderer walk free. I'm offering you the complete destruction of one of Asia's most powerful criminal syndicates," Jaewon countered. "Every associate, every financial pipeline, every corrupt official. I can provide testimony that will keep your prosecutors busy for years, but only if I'm alive and safe. The moment I'm vulnerable, the moment what's left of the network believes they can reach me, I become a liability to everyone involved." "You're asking us to choose between justice and pragmatism," the Ghanaian lawyer said. "I'm asking you to choose between punishing one man and dismantling an empire that's killed hundreds." Jaewon's voice was cold. "My father will die in prison. His lieutenants will die in prison. The Kim Syndicate is finished. The only question is whether you want my continued cooperation or whether you want the symbolic victory of putting me in a cell." The negotiations continued for 2 more days. Legal teams argued. Bureaucrats consulted with their governments. Compromises were drafted, rejected, revised. In the end, pragmatism won. The agreement was signed digitally, encrypted and authenticated by all parties. Jaewon would receive complete immunity from prosecution in Ghana, protected status as a confidential witness for Interpol, and guaranteed security provisions. In exchange, he would provide unlimited cooperation with ongoing investigations, testify remotely in any trials requiring his testimony, and maintain his exile from South Korea permanently. He would never go home. But then, home had never been Seoul. Home was a villa in Accra where two tiny boys fought to grow stronger every day, where a woman he'd failed was learning to trust him again, where he was building something clean from the ashes of everything he'd burned. When the video conference ended, Jaewon sat in the study for a long time, staring at the signed agreement on his screen. He was free, legally, politically, practically free. The bounty was worthless, there was no organization left to pay it. The threat was neutralized, his father was imprisoned, and the syndicate was dismantled. His sons were safe, he'd destroyed everything to save them. And somehow, impossibly, it had worked. Amma found him there an hour later. She stood in the doorway, watching him, and for the first time since the hospital, her expression held something other than anger. "Is it over?" she asked quietly. "Yes," Jaewon said. "It's over." She nodded slowly, processing. "Then, what happens now?" Jaewon looked at her, this woman who'd loved him, hated him, given him sons, and challenged him to become something better than the monster he'd been. "Now," he said, "I learned to be the man you needed me to be all along." Amma's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. "That's going to take a lifetime, Jay." "I know," he said, "but I have one to give." She didn't come to him. Not yet. But she didn't leave either. And in that moment, standing in the doorway between past and future, Jaewon understood that redemption wasn't a destination. It was a road he'd walk every day for the rest of his life, earning back what he'd lost, one small step at a time. Outside, Accra continued its chaotic, beautiful rhythm. Inside, two tiny boys slept in their incubators, their hearts beating strong, and Kim Jae-won, former heir to a criminal empire, began the hardest work of his life, learning to live. 3 months later, Jaewon woke to the sound of crying and smiled. The apartment in Osu was nothing like the cantonment's villa. 2 bedrooms, a modest living room, a kitchen barely big enough for 2 people to stand in. The walls were painted a cheerful yellow that Amma had chosen, and the windows looked out over a quiet street where vendors sold kelewele and women braided hair under mango trees. It was ordinary. It was humble. It was perfect. Jaewon padded barefoot to the nursery, a repurposed second bedroom with 2 cribs, a changing table, and walls covered in Amma's careful drawings of animals and stars. Jae was awake, his face scrunched in that particular expression of infant outrage that meant he was hungry and wanted the world to know immediately. Kofi slept on, oblivious, his tiny chest rising and falling with the easy rhythm of a healthy 3-month-old. No ventilators, no monitors, no tubes or wires or machines keeping them alive. Just 2 boys, breathing on their own, thriving. All right, Jaewon whispered, lifting Jae carefully. The boy had grown so much, 2.8 kilograms now, chubby and indignant, his dark eyes sharp and aware. "Let's not wake your brother. You know how grumpy he gets." He carried Jae to the kitchen, prepared a bottle with practiced efficiency, and settled into the worn armchair by the window. Dawn was breaking over Accra, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster crowed. The city was waking up, and Jaewon was just another father feeding his son, invisible in his ordinariness. They had new names now. Legal documents, processed through channels Minho had arranged. David Mensah, software consultant. Amma had kept her first name but taken a different surname, Amma Osei, economic development researcher. The twins were registered as Ghanaian citizens, their birth certificates listing a private clinic and parents who'd never been to Seoul. Kim Jae-won was dead. David Mensah lived in his place. Jae finished his bottle and let out a satisfied burp that would have made his grandfather proud, if Kim Dae-soo had been the kind of grandfather who cared about such things. Which he wasn't. Which he would never be. Jaewon's phone buzzed on the counter. A message from an encrypted number he recognized. Minho. He opened it with one hand, still holding Jae against his shoulder. "Hyung-nim, thought you should know. Kim Dae-soo died in prison 3 days ago. Heart attack. They kept it quiet, but it hit the news this morning. The remnants of the organization have officially declared you dead and exiled. The bounty is void. You're a ghost. You're free." Jaewon stared at the message for a long time, He should feel something, he thought. Relief, closure, maybe even grief. But all he felt was a distant, hollow echo of a life that belonged to someone else. His father was dead. The shadow dragon had fallen, and Jaewon felt nothing at all. He typed a response. "Thank you, brother. For everything." Minho's reply came quickly. "Take care of those boys. Make it worth it." "I will." Jaewon deleted the message thread and set the phone down. Jae had fallen back asleep against his shoulder, his small body warm and trusting. Through the nursery door, Jaewon could see Kofi stirring, his little fists waving in the air. Amma emerged from their bedroom, wrapped in one of his old shirts, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She looked tired. They were always tired these days, but there was color in her cheeks and strength in her movements. She'd healed. Not completely. Maybe never completely. But enough. "Jay's awake?" she asked softly. "Fed and asleep again. Kofi's starting to move." She smiled and went to the nursery, lifting Kofi with the ease of 3 months' practice. Jaewon watched her settle into the rocking chair, watched her cradle their son, watched the morning light catch in her hair. She was humming something, a twee lullaby her mother had taught her, and Kofi's eyes were already drifting closed. "My father died," Jaewon said quietly. Amma looked up, her expression unreadable. "How do you feel?" "I don't know. Empty, maybe. Like closing a book I stopped reading years ago." She nodded slowly. "Are you safe now? Are they safe?" "Yes. The syndicate declared me dead. The bounty is gone. We're free." "Free," Amma repeated, testing the word. Then softer. "Are we, Jay? Are we really free? Or are we just hiding?" Jaewon looked down at the boy sleeping in his arms. Jay's face was peaceful, his tiny hand curled around Jaewon's finger with that grip that still felt like the weight of the universe. In the nursery, Kofi made soft sleeping sounds, safe in his mother's arms. "I used to think freedom meant power," Jaewon said. "I thought it meant having enough money, enough control, enough fear surrounding me that I could do whatever I wanted. That's what my father taught me. That's what the syndicate was built on." He paused, his throat tight. "But that wasn't freedom. That was a prison made of blood and steel." He stood carefully, moving to stand beside Amma. Together they looked at their sons, 2 tiny boys who knew nothing of soul, nothing of syndicates, nothing of the violence that had made their existence possible. "This is freedom," Jaewon whispered. "Waking up to feed a hungry baby, living in an apartment that costs less than my father spent on dinner, having a name no one knows and a life no one wants to take from me. Watching you forgive me one small moment at a time. Holding our sons and knowing they'll never be weapons or heirs or anything except exactly who they choose to be." Amma's eyes filled with tears. "You destroyed everything for this." "Yes. Was it worth it?" Jaewon looked at Jay in his arms, at Kofi in hers, at the humble apartment with its yellow walls and secondhand furniture, at the woman who'd loved him and hated him and given him a reason to become something better. "Every second," he said. "Every single second." Amma reached out, her hand finding his, their fingers intertwining between their sleeping sons. It wasn't forgiveness. Not completely. But it was a beginning. It was a foundation they could build on, one day at a time, one small moment of trust at a time. Outside, Accra continued its beautiful, chaotic rhythm. Street vendors called out their wares. Children laughed on their way to school. The world turned, indifferent to the fall of criminal empires and the redemption of monsters. And in a modest apartment in Osu, David Mensah held his sons close and whispered to them the truth he'd learned at the cost of everything he'd ever been. "I am free." The words settled in his chest like a benediction. Like absolution he didn't deserve but had earned anyway. Through blood and sacrifice and the complete destruction of everything he'd once called his identity. He was free. Not because he'd escaped, not because he'd won, but because he'd finally, impossibly, learned to let go. Jay stirred in his arms, making small infant sounds. Kofi yawned and snuggled deeper into Amma's embrace, and Jaewon understood that this ordinary, exhausting, beautiful life was the only inheritance worth giving them. Not power, not wealth, not the weight of dynasty, just peace, just love, just a father who'd chosen them over everything else and would choose them again, every single day, for the rest of his life. "I am free," he whispered again, and this time he believed it. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications. Drop a comment and tell me, what would you sacrifice for the ones you love? I create stories like this every day that will take you on emotional journeys you'll never forget. Subscribe now and join this incredible community. I'll see you in the next one.